Yeah.
Yeah, hey, hi, good evening. We'll just wait for 2 more minutes and then we'll give it to go.
Sounds good.
All right, we'll be giving it a go now. So yesterday we talked about how you have these different types of testing. We talked about functional, non-functional, black box, white box, and different levels of testing that we have up in here. Now, when we talk about some other types of testing, we have here as smoke. Now, see, we have smoke. Then I'll talk about sanity, regression, and retesting. After that, also, we have a lot many. But these first four types I'll discuss in one stretch. Because when we talk about these particular testing types, right, that's how we have kind of all of this. Okay. So when we have this smoke testing, right? Smoke testing is primarily you would be doing onto your new build, which is provided by the developers to the testing. How it is, I'll tell you. See what happens now. When you have your application here, this application will be created by your development team. And your development team has to provide that application to the test team. Okay. Now, before testing starts doing any of the testing, because as soon as the testing will receive the application, they'll have to start testing, right? But what happens is, before the test team starts doing any testing onto that particular application, there will be a smoke testing, which is primarily to verify the basic functionalities. Now, when you talk about the basic functionalities, what are the basic functionalities? Like whether the application is opening properly, application is closing properly, we are able to see the menu options, right? All that basic stuff, generally, it is being tested in the smoke testing. Just to, because see, if these basic functionalities are not working, there is no point of sharing that application with the testee, right? Because what happens now, if you don't do this and you share that application, let's say testing has to test some, let's say, some shopping cart functionality or like what do you call as the order functionality, then there is no point because application is not loading properly. You're not able to close it. You don't even see the login screen. Then what's the point of passing it on to the testing for further testing? So just to make sure that the time of testing team doesn't go in vain, they do something known as smoke testing. Now, what they are doing with this smoke testing is because the development team, what they share with this team, test team, we call it as build. Build is nothing but this application only, but we call it as a build. Okay. Because application is something that we call when all these testing verifications are completed. Until and unless whatever these different variations of this application the development team is creating, like, fixing bugs, by fixing bugs and by then sharing these, making changes to add new features. Everything they're going to call it as just build, which is an executable copy of your application only. So onto that, this smoke testing will be performed and the build will be accepted. Only if this build is passing these smoke tests. If these basic functionalities are not working, we'll consider the smoke testing being failed. The build will be rejected and will send back to the development team. Sent to the development team as in errors. Because this is also type of testing only. So it will identify those errors in the basic functionalities and they'll tell the development team to first fix those errors. Otherwise, will not share it with the testing. That is smoke testing. Similarly, we have another one which we're calling it as sanity. Sanity is also like smoke only. Why like smoke only? Because both of these are build verification testing. Smoke and sanity. Right. Now, what happens in this case now? Smoke, we did that for the basic functionalities to verify. Okay. But you know that every time the development team will make any changes to that application, we will call it as a new build. So let's say they added new feature, new build. They fixed some bugs, new build, likewise. Okay. So they'll keep creating these new builds. And we also know that we are doing smoke testing to verify the basic functionalities. Verification, or you can say testing for the basic functionalities. Now, when it will keep upgraded. After some time, let's say at this point, let's say after 20 builds, there will be a point where we need not to perform smoke testing. Why? Because we were doing smoke testing for the basic functionalities, right? Now, basic functionalities are already done. These are all working fine. Okay. Now, because basic functionalities are working fine, then now there's no need to go for the smoke testing, but still we have to verify the build, right, before it is passed to the test team for further testing. Okay. So what we would do now here is in this build verification testing, once we have those stable builds, because earlier those builds were unstable because the basic functionalities were not working. But now when the builds are stable, okay, then what we would do is we will check for something else, like whether the new functionalities which they are promising in here, whether those functionalities are available there or not. Let's say it says that, okay, in this build, we have implemented payment by debit card. In this, we have fixed a bug and payment by credit card. So likewise. Now we'll verify that okay, if they're saying that payment by debit card, whether it is available or not, whether it is working fine or not, that will be tested here by the test team. because this build verification will be primarily done by your test lead or someone, generally senior person from your test team. Not the whole team will do it, right? So this is all about verifying the build before it is passed to the test team for further testing, so that all of their time can be saved. That is build verification testing. And that is what we do for this your build, which your testing will be receiving in that. This is sanity. Okay. Now comes the third one, which we have as regression. I'll discuss four of these in one stretch. Then I'll go in the now just explaining with the help of this picture. Now what do we have here is now what we have next is regression. Now regression, what happens then? Now we have here is regression. Now what happens in regression? I'll tell you. Let's say first we have first we are talking about a scenario without regression. Let's say it is not there. Okay. First we have the testing going on without regression, because regression will be primarily thing in there in that you're testing itself. Now what do we have here is now we are going with agile. Okay. And in agile we go with sprints. Or to be more specific, I can call it as agile scrum. We go with sprints. Now here, let's say Your application is made up of four features: F1, F2, F3, and F4. Okay. And you have planned to implement each of these features in individual sprints. Sprint 1, Sprint 2, Sprint 3, and Sprint 4. Right? And at the end of Sprint 4, you're planning to have your full application. Because in each sprint, you are developing one feature there. Now, we know that when you talk about sprint, what you do in that sprint is you actually perform everything. Because sprint is, as we discussed earlier, sprint is what? Sprint is the complete software development lifecycle. Everything you do here: planning, designing, development, testing, deployment, everything, right? So we are assuming that at the end of sprint one, feature one would be completely ready, delivered. That is how it is. Okay. Now, when we have this, in that case, what happens now? We will go ahead with this and we will see that this is how it's going to go. Now, see, we are all concerned about just the efforts which are put up by the testing team. Okay. So, testing team efforts, how would we count in there? Like, how many test cases you have executed for testing. That's how the testing team efforts are being calculated. So, let's assume hypothetically that to test this feature F1, your test team has executed 100 test cases. To test your feature F2, let's say there were 200 test cases. Because in every sprint we are doing testing also, no? Then only we are making that particular feature to ready to be delivered. Test cases. Right? So now what happens is if you combine all of your testing efforts here, that goes to 1,000 test cases if we are not going with regression. We don't know what regression is yet. So we're just going in a normal way without doing anything. That okay, we have a feature that we have to test in every sprint. Okay. Now this is without regression. Now you talk about with regression. Now what happens in the case of regression is let me just draw a line here. Now, in this case, what happens? Now, in case of regression, how these things will be there in every sprint. So, sprint one, your first sprint, you don't see any additional efforts or anything noticeable in the sprint one because you just have one feature to have tested. So here it would be 100 test cases in the sprint number one. Now the question is, what is regression testing? Regression testing says that if you have made any changes to the system, there are chances that you could have disturbed or any new errors or any problems has been introduced to the previously implemented feature or functionality. That we will see that we would experience in the sprint number two. How? Because in the sprint number two, ultimately, you are implementing these features F1, F2, F3, F4, right? So in the sprint number two, when you're implementing feature F2, and in the previous sprint, you have already implemented feature F1, but both are part of the same application only, right? So when you are implementing feature F2, you are making some changes in the application. And because of those changes, there are chances that there could be some errors in the previously implemented feature F1. But that's a theory. How would you verify that? That, okay, I created this feature F2 and I am testing this feature F2 with my 200 test cases. But at the same time, you have to test the feature F1 again. You have to test it again because you have made changes in the system. And those to implement feature F2, and those changes would have caused any errors in the previously implemented feature F1. Okay. So to do that, in the sprint number two, verify the feature F1 again, what we do? How would you verify if there are any errors in the feature F1 or not? By executing those same test cases that you created earlier in the sprint number one. So in sprint number two, you will not only test the feature F2 with 200 test cases, but you will also test feature F1 again just to make sure that there are no errors introduced in the feature F1 because we implemented feature F2. So now if I talk about the total efforts in the sprint number two with regression testing, it would be 200 plus 100. That is 300 test cases. Okay. Now we go to the sprint number three, where we are implementing feature F3. Now to implement this feature F3, we did design, development, and testing. Now to test feature F3, let's say we executed 300 test cases. But because we are going with regression, we need to make sure that because of the changes that we made in the system to implement feature F3, there are chances that the previously implemented features F1 and F2 might have some error. We're not sure, but might have some error. But there is only one way to verify that, and that is to execute their respective test cases again. Test cases are already created. We need not to create the test cases again. But we have to execute those test cases just to check if we have those errors there or not, or any new errors has been introduced there or not. That is when you will test this again. So for F1, we'll again execute 100 test cases. For F2, we'll again execute 200 test cases. And that is how we'll go with this. So the total effort in the sprint number 3 will be 600 test cases. In the sprint number 3. Similarly, in the sprint number 4, because a new feature is implemented, so just to verify that the previously implemented features are working fine, we will verify all of these again by executing their respective test cases. And when you add all of this would come 1,000 test cases. And now, when we count the total effort with all these 4 modules in the regression testing, then it will come around 100 plus 300 plus 600 plus 1,000. That is 2,000 test cases, which is actually doubling up the efforts that you are putting in the testing approach without regression. So yes, with regression, your work is increasing, your testing efforts are increasing. This is just a hypothetical scenario, so we went double. But in real world scenarios, it can go more there as well, because more number of these features and more number of modules that you have, it will have accordingly that many number of test cases being increased, because it is increasing exponentially. You have to test all the previously implemented features when you are going with all this up in here. That is regression testing. Right? So that is how we call it as a regression testing, going with this. Because every time there is a change, there is an update in the system, in your application, you have to verify that all the previously implemented features and functionalities are working fine. And this newly implemented feature or functionality has not disturbed any of the previously implemented functionalities. That is what we call as regression testing. Well, I'll talk about these all. Let's just discuss this also. Retesting. Now, retesting, I will show you with the help of an example. where what do we have is what actually we do here. You see, we go with this. Let's say you have 10 test cases. Right? And you have executed all those 10 test cases to test some functionalities and all. And out of those 10 test cases, these are the test cases which are passed, but there were these test cases which are failed. Okay. What we are talking about here is we are talking about retesting. So now what would happen is generally being a QA, what you would do that, okay, you got these errors. So you will report these failures as errors to the development team. That's what your job as a QA, right? Okay. You got these test cases failed, which means that functionality is not behaving properly as expected. It's not behaving as expected. So what would you do? You would report that as an error to the development team. There were three, so you reported those as errors to your development team. Now, what development team will do? Because you did this all testing over a build, right? Now, what your development team will do? Your development team will fix those errors reported by you, and they will provide you a new build with where they are claiming, the development team is claiming that these errors are fixed. These defects are fixed. These errors are not there. Okay. But you can't trust the words of these folks. So what would you do? You have to verify. But when you will go with this verification, because they are claiming that, hey, the development team is claiming that, hey, you reported those errors now. So we have fixed it. But you can't trust these developers. So what you do, you have to verify the bug fix. Now, how would you verify? So if they're saying that, okay, these specific errors that you reported, these errors were there because of which test case? These three test cases. So now in this retesting, you will not execute all the test cases. No. You will simply execute only the test cases which were failed earlier. Only those test cases which were failed earlier. Because every other thing is working fine. You got errors because of these three. You reported those errors. Development team has fixed it. They provided you a new build. And now what you would do? You would verify the bug fix, the defect fix. And that is the reason we also call this retesting as bug fix verification or defect fix verification testing, wherein you simply check if that particular defect, if that particular bug has been fixed or not. That is what you will check here, rather than testing everything. And that's where it is different from regression. Because in regression, what we were doing, we were executing all the test cases again. Everything we were executing again. Because we need to check that, okay, because of this newly implemented feature, there were no errors introduced in the previously implemented feature. But in retesting, we are simply going with this. Just to execute those failed test cases. That is what retesting is all about. Now, that's what I wanted to discuss with you, these four test cases. Now, when I go back and look at the presentation, now I will discuss what is there in the presentation for these four types of testing. See, we started with smoke. I told you that smoke we'll be doing on our new build. Which is provided by developers to the QA team. And in this new build, we'll simply verify that if the basic functionalities are working or not. That's it. Because it is the first test to be done on any new build because it is a build verification. Test. Build verification test. Okay. So we are simply verifying the build before it is being passed on to the testing team for further testing. So the test cases that you choose, it's all about the most important functionalities or most important component. Not everything you will test. It's like a high level testing. Because the objective is not to perform or not to test everything. No. Here we just need to verify the critical functionalities. And that's what we discussed here. Then came sanity. Sanity is when you are receiving a new build with minor modifications. How? Because here we discussed that those modifications will make that build number going up. So what would you do here? You will simply verify whether, because you have added a new feature here, so whether that feature is available, first of all. Next, you will check that in this sanity. That is, we are going with the sanity. And that's what like they have mentioned here also. It is more like a subset of your regression testing, where you will go with group of these test cases. That's how it is different. This is sanity. Regression also see what they're saying. Whenever developers change or modify the functionality, there is a huge possibility that these update may cause unexpected behaviors. So regression testing is performed here just to make sure that these changes are not breaking any of the existing functionality. That's what we saw here, right? Because the purpose here is with regression testing is to find out that if there are any bugs which have been accidentally introduced into the existing build and to make sure that the previously removed bugs are continuing to stay there. That's what we do in the regression testing. And that's what we saw here. But the only thing is, because you have to make sure that the previously implemented features and previously fixed bugs are all working fine and not bothering you again, respectively. So you have to execute all the test cases. That is how it is. And that's why regression is coming up with these limitations also, that because the number of test cases, of course, will increase That's what we saw here, right? Because with each feature, you have to test it again, previously implemented feature. Sometimes, if you are planning to execute all these test cases, it is difficult because ultimately you're doing a rework here, right? Rework in a sense that it is all going in and making sure that up in here and minimizing this test suite while achieving maximum test coverage is not a cakewalk. That's why the determination of frequency of regression test after every modification or every build update or after a bunch of bug fixes is always a challenge. So it's not like every time we have now because we have automation. So we can do that up in here if we are able to do this. Because generally we go with automation when you have repetitive types of testing. It can be combined with that. But still, if you need to figure it out, right? You have to plan it properly. That's going to be planned by your test manager, though. But they'll plan it in a way so that because we can't just go without regression, also. Regression is an important part. So we don't go without regression, but we don't go with regression in every phase. So where that regression will fit in, so all those frequencies, right? All those occurrences of regression tests will be defined properly in the beginning itself. But regression testing will be there. We can't just skip that. But having that, you have to take care of these limitations of it. Retesting, I just told you. Sometimes people ask the questions or the difference, question in the form of like difference between regression and retesting. So you can say that a retesting is all about defect fix verification. That is what retesting is. Regression, on the other hand, is you're executing every test case for the previously implemented features every time you go in the next aspect. You go with the deployment of next feature. That's how it is. That is how we have this happen. Yeah. That is what we have these for. Right? So these are these four types of testing. Do we have any questions so far in these four types of testing? We have others as well, like performance and all more, but that we'll discuss tomorrow. Right now, these four testing I want to discuss in today's session. And
Yeah,
what
I
I,
don't have any questions.
all right. And what I would do is I would just put this in the chat as well, this presentation, so that
Okay.
goes.
So far I've been making notes, just trying to review all the stuff you explained in the recordings, and I've completed all of last week's stuff. So now I'm just waiting for the recordings of this week, and then I'll start making notes about all the testing stuff.
Yeah. So recordings of this week also will be there pretty soon. Maybe I'll have a
Okay.
word with the HR tomorrow morning. Maybe by tomorrow it will be there. At
Okay.
least
And yeah,
today.
then I'll look it over, and if I have any questions, I'll ask you.
Sure, sure, no problems.
I finished the UML diagrams. Do you want me to show them to you now, or should we just wait?
Yeah, no, you can just have that being exported as an image or a PDF, and you can share that in the chat. I'll just save that and I'll keep it there.
Okay, it's done.
Okay, let me download that. Okay, I had downloaded that. We'll review and we'll discuss that later. Okay.
Okay, sounds good. So I guess I'll speak to you
Yes.
tomorrow.
All right. Yeah. Have a great night and we'll meet tomorrow. Bye. Take care.
All right. Bye.